Welcome to What Are You Even Talking About? The podcast where we talk a little bit about everything. I am your host, the Nomothete. Welcome to the show. Talking about the podcast.
Yeah, I had it.
All right. Welcome to What Are You Even Talking About? The podcast where we talk a little bit about everything. Today's guest is a behavior and relationship expert. She prioritizes personal development, being your authentic expression, and clear communication as the foundations for relationship security. She is certified relationship coach with a PhD in behavioral health, a bachelor's in exercise science, a certified yoga instructor, and a certified mindfulness teacher. I am grateful to have Dr. Breanna Reeser on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I was really excited when you reached out to have me on the podcast. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I was like looking at your page and I was just like, wow. I was like, she could definitely help me in some situations I've had and have a lot of great information for our guest. So very happy to have you here.
I love that it still happens like that on Instagram where you just get fed real, authentic people. So often on Instagram right now or social media, there's just so much fake, just like BS. And so it's really cool that you and I got connected over Instagram the old fashioned way and
Yeah,
really hit it off. And we like each other's content and we really align on some cool topics.
that's awesome. I think that's awesome as well because usually you do get a lot of fakeness when it comes to Instagram, and you'll
Mhm.
have people who message you and they'll just not be on the wavelength that you are
Right.
and give you a bunch of information that's not needed or
Mm,
not wanted, and
right.
that can be terrible for somebody who is in a place where they feel like they can't get out of, or
Mhm.
just a situation that means a lot to them, and someone comes and messes the whole thing up because they gave the wrong
Yeah,
advice, and that
that's
happens a
true.
lot.
Yeah, we just
Um,
don't know what anybody else is going through, like we just don't know. And it's really hard to find that out over social media. So just that discernment's so important. You're right.
yeah. So we do this thing on the show where the last guest asks a question to the next guest without knowing who they're going to be.
Cool.
Yeah, we got this off of Diary of a CEO. It's a YouTube channel, and he does it at the end of the show. And I was like, "That's really cool. I need to take that and use that for my show." So the last guest question was, "What is the real measure of success?"
Hmm. That is something that I've spent a lot of time this last 2 years kind of going through for me. And it's first of all, it's a personal thing, right? So I think that everybody's measure of success needs to be aligned to their values. And it doesn't have to be, there's no right answer on it. It has to just be personal and true for you. And for me, the measure of success for me is impact. So I feel like I'm being successful when I can see that I'm making an impact in the people that I'm working with. And so um, my biggest value in my offering, the way that I live my life, just my life's purpose in general, is to make the impact that I want to make on people, giving them the ability to show up to relationships securely and just be proud of how they're showing up to things. I just want people to leave any conversation, to leave any situation and be like, yeah, that was me. I'm proud of who I was in that moment.
That's a really good answer.
Mhm.
I think for me would be effort. If I give enough effort for me, if I'm trying my best and trying my hardest, I'm giving it all I can, that that's enough. And a lot of
Yeah.
people don't feel like they're doing enough, or they don't have the
Mhm.
time to do enough. So I think effort would be my answer for that.
I
Um,
like,
so we
yeah.
have
Thanks
Go
for
ahead, go
sharing
ahead.
that because I think it's so important for us to align on what success means for us personally. Because your mental health is so like tied up in that. Like, what does it mean to be successful? We can get really down a hole if we think that we have to like earn a bunch of money or like have fame or all those kinds of things. So it's good. I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about success differently too, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you have to nowadays because in
Yeah.
the age of social media, everything looks perfect and you're only seeing a small portion of a person's day. And we
Hmm.
take that to heart and we'll think that's all the time for them. Like we'll stop thinking about them having problems and will just think their life is going great. And then we'll take that inside, like we'll internalize that. And then we'll be like, well, I'm not doing as well as they are, or I'm not doing the things they're doing, so I must be doing worse. And like
Right.
it just becomes a thing in our minds that ends up taking over and stops you from getting the progress that you want. Like you just put yourself, you dig a hole that you can't get out of because all you can see is what someone else is doing and what someone else is achieving. But it's maybe not be your time at that moment, but you'll have your time if you just be patient. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we all forget about when looking at social media. It's hard to discern how much of their life is good compared to how much isn't.
Yeah, we
And
just lose all sense of normalcy. Like it's all just completely upside down.
yeah, it's so bad. I even catch myself doing it.
Yeah,
Like,
same.
yeah, and it's just like, wait, I'm not even trying to go for the same goals they are. And it's like, and so you're
Their
just like,
life looks terrible. I don't know why I keep trying to compete with them.
yeah. Or it's like I've seen one picture of their day.
Right.
That's, yeah, I mean, a moment in time, a mere moment in time. And so it's
Hmm.
like they could have had the rest of the day been terrible or
Right.
not live up to their own expectations. And then they're mad about the day and you think it was perfect. And it's just something to think about because
Hmm.
people take things out of context all the time.
That's right.
Um, we have some questions from the subscribers for
Okay.
today.
Excited.
Um, I asked the question last night, if you could ask a relationship expert one thing, what would you ask? And these were some of the questions I got. And then I have some personal questions I would like for you to answer because I know I've had issues with relationships in the past. I'm single right now. And, I think your outlook could help me do better in the section of relationships. And so I'm
Okay.
excited about that. So tell us a little bit about your journey first, how you got to where you are.
Oh my gosh. Take us the next 3 years to talk through that. So I'll make it I'll make it quick. It's probably very similar to other people's journeys. I've had some really difficult challenges in my relationships, and a lot of the challenges repeat themselves in other relationships. And so when you start to see the pattern that the common denominator in all of my relationships is me. So, I can't really change anybody else, but I can be my own master and I can really start to dig in and see what's happening with me. Like, what am I doing these things for? Why am I doing these types of behaviors? Why is this thought process always triggering when this happens? And being curious about my expression, how I'm reacting, what my behaviors and patterns are like, has been the whole journey. Honestly, it's been the whole journey. But I didn't really become aware of that as my responsibility until I had a failed marriage. So I ended up divorcing in 2018, end of 2018, after 11 years. And,
Wow.
on the outside, it looked perfect and it felt pretty good. He was a good guy. And I was just really upside down in my mentality, my mindset, my mental health. And it wasn't really about him. It was really about me. But that didn't occur to me until my first relationship after my marriage, where I was repeating all the same patterns. The same stuff was happening on every relationship. And so it was nice to be able to recognize that. And then I started to work with a company called Pivot, which I now use all of their information and their curriculum. It was really wonderful. They do a deep dive into developmental psychology and
Okay.
really personal responsibility. You can't change anybody else, but you can take responsibility for who you are in the relationship. And, that's probably a very relatable story. I think most people can recognize their own patterns and how they screw things up. And then, there's an empowerment piece there. Like you have a choice. You can make a difference in how things go for you.
Wonderful. I went through that myself not too recently. It was about 2 years ago now. And I was seeing the same patterns that I'd seen before in previous relationships. Like, it was verbatim. And I was like, this is the same exact thing they did. And then I was
Mhm.
realizing I kept being like, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. And I was like, but there's nothing I can do about that. What can I do to make sure I'm doing right? And
Right.
and I tried for that, but sadly, it didn't go the way I thought it would.
Mhm.
And I had to make a choice if this was something I was going to let continue or was I going to change the direction and get out of the relationship. And so
Yeah.
that's what I did was, for the best of both of us. Like I didn't want to be in a toxic relationship. I didn't
Mhm.
want to fight all the time and I had to let it go. And, sometimes you just have to do that in order to maintain peace for everybody.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely. It
definitely
could be the most compassionate thing to do is to exit a relationship that no longer serves you. And, the reason why I know that most relationship dynamics are my choice and they're your choice is because the person that you're engaging in relationship with was your choice. This is a relationship
yeah,
that you chose for yourself. So really kind of laddering it all the way back to what attracted this person to me, what made
yeah,
this person feel like I wanted to choose them, like what was my decision making process at that moment, and what was that based off of. And so often we base our decision making process off of our early attachment styles to our caregivers and how our lives were when we were children, and we don't ever learn that. We don't ever get to see any of that for ourselves until, 3 or 4 relationships down the road where it becomes very apparent painfully.
yeah. I know it would mine. I was doing the same things over and over and over
Mhm.
again, and I was expecting the same things over and over and over again, and when I
Yeah.
didn't get them, I was so quick to blame them, but I was like, "I could have done more too." Like, I could have done stuff to stop this before it got to be a problem, and
Right.
I didn't, so you have to take accountability for that. You definitely have to take accountability for that because if you don't, you'll continue to do the same things over and over and over again. You just
And
have to because that's what you know. Like that's a
yeah.
part of what you learned growing up. And
Mhm.
you start to realize like people that you're going after are like your parents. And you're like, why would I pick that? Especially if you didn't have a good relationship with your parents, but it's like because that's what you knew. That's
Yeah.
what you think a good relationship was, or at least a relationship that you're used to dealing with. So you go after that in others. And that goes with your friends, your coworkers. You can't choose your coworkers, but you choose your friends and you choose your girlfriends or boyfriends. And you choose that
Yep.
at the end
And
of the day.
sometimes you choose them so that they're exactly opposite of your parents, so you never have to deal with that again. And
Yeah.
sometimes you choose it because you're trying to find what you didn't get from your parents, right? And it's not always just that we're choosing exactly what we had as children. It's that we're choosing it because of a belief system that we were instilled in as children. And just uncovering that belief system will help us understand why we're making those choices. It's different for everybody. It's not always the same kind of reasons, but it all comes down to the attachment style that we had with our early caregivers and the types of core beliefs that we ingrained in ourselves based off of our environments and how we now express that in our adulthood.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I
So
know.
thank you. Like it's when you think about it, it's so easy to get around those problems, but we make
Mm,
it more difficult because of how we think at the time. Like
that's true.
we choose a lot of things on at the moment, and we don't give time to think about the
Yeah.
altercation. Because with my ex, we had dated before, so it was like I knew, what I was, gonna expect from her, and I knew what I was gonna get from her before we even started again. But I was like, we're gonna try this again. Maybe it'll be different. But inherently, I knew what I was gonna get, and it made it hard because I loved her,
Mhm.
and but I knew it wasn't gonna change, and I felt like it was because I was the one making it that way.
That's
Um,
a possibility. I think that our dynamics go both ways. How I act will set up the other person for what they feel, whether or not they feel safety. And not how they act is not my responsibility, but I sure have some influence on it.
yeah, definitely. Okay, so the first question I have is from Crystal. She asks, when is the right time to introduce your new partner to your children, or when is the best time? Well, when is the best time to introduce your children to your new partner? And
Yeah. Mhm.
and the second part of the question was, is it ever too soon to say I love you?
Mm. And you're probably going to get tired of me saying these things because these are truly just so personal to everybody, but I'll give a little context on both of those things. First of all, you should get clear on what you mean by love, and you should ask your partner what they mean by love. So expressing affection there's never a wrong time to do that if it's authentic for you. What are you trying to get by saying I love you? Are you bartering for connection? Are you trying to bait somebody into saying it back to you? Like, what's the reasoning behind the affection and the words? If you're if you're really feeling so in your truth about needing to say this from your truth to this person, and you're not attached to the outcome, then that's a great thing to be in, is being able to just be truthful about how you're feeling and your expression. If you do feel like you have some sort of request for the outcome to be a certain way, then you probably should pause a little bit and sit with that discomfort, because the question is, what is that solving? Is there a reason for it? And what's the reason for you? So those are some questions to ask yourself when you're deciding on whether or not I should say I love you and when that should be. And then go back to being clear on what love means for you, because it does mean something different for everybody. And
Really
it's
does.
wild how many different definitions of love there are. And that could be a date topic prior to making things a little bit more serious. Like, what does love mean for you? If you were to say, I love you, what would that mean when you said it? So now you know what they mean when they say it. And then you can explore that for yourself. What do I mean when I say I love you? What does that mean to me? How does that change things? Um, and with the kids, like being able to introduce your partner to your kids, it depends on how old your kids are. And so when you have adult children, that's a whole different conversation than when you have younger children. And I think that you might hear a plane going by. Sorry, real quick. I'll just let that pass. The other thing is that this is a shared conversation with if you have a living partner that you're co-parenting with, that's a shared conversation and shared decision making. Most often, there's a few times where you don't want to, if somebody has a really toxic ex and they're no longer in their life, that's different. But if you do have a co-parenting type of relationship, this is something that's not just your choice to make. So, so that's difficult. But if your kids are a little bit older, 13, older than 13, then it's probably okay after a little bit of time to start to introduce the idea of having another partner. And then when your kids are a little bit younger, it's going to take a long time. And then the expectations on what are you expecting your children to do, and how are you assimilating this, and what's the outcome going to be like? Are you going to be sharing more time together? And what is that going to look like? So that's a whole family unit conversation that takes a lot of dynamics just to think through. So the question is very personal and the answer is very personal, but doing the due diligence of sitting with yourself and writing those things down can really get you to a better answer, a more aligned answer that will go more smoothly for you if you do it that way.
I think that's a wonderful answer. I issue with my son, and now that I have my daughter, that's a question I'll have to ask her as well. But like, if I'm dating somebody, I let them know I'm dating someone, but I don't know where it's going to be at in the beginning,
Right.
and that way they're not ready to meet them or wanting to think that's going to be their new mommy or daddy. Like, these are things you have to really take in consideration because it affects more than just you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's depending on like how your children feel about things. Like, this person's going to be talking to them, or being in their lives in some way. What do you expect of that person? How they're going to be in their life? And like, do you want them to start acting more like a parent figure, or you just want them to be a friend until? I mean, it takes a lot when you think
Yeah.
about that because it really affects more than just you,
Yeah.
and that's tough, and it just depends on when you can feel like they're going to be a part of your life for any length of time. I feel
Yeah.
like, go ahead, go
We
ahead.
use Yeah, we use a term called circle boundaries and a framework called circle boundaries in Pivot that helps us vet people for trustworthiness. And so, you have this idea of people that you know enough about to know that they're toxic. They go in this category called outer. And then people that you are completely unconditionally trustworthy with, they go into inner. That's really just for like your personal God and your your spirit life. Really, there's not a human that would be completely unconditional. And then there's layers in between that. Acquaintance is people that you just met. Semi is people that you're learning to trust. And then good is people that you really trust. And the way that people go from acquaintance to semi to good is time. So the way that we are able to build trust with somebody is time plus consistency. How do they act over time? And so I can't tell you how much time and I can't tell you how much consistency it takes to get someone into a boundary system where you can trust them enough to introduce them to your children. But just thinking about time plus consistency. Are they consistently trustworthy over time? And if you can say yes over a myriad of situations and you have shared values and you have reciprocal conversations with them, then you're getting closer to a yes for that also.
And I feel like time is a big factor of things. Over time, you might feel a certain way than you felt in the beginning, and that can always change within any given amount of time. Um,
Yeah.
you get like
And
if you might feel that a few seconds you're happy with them, but you don't know how it's going to be in a year.
And time isn't the only factor there. It's the reason why time is important is because time gives us exposure to new situations and circumstances. So if in that time you get exposure to new circumstances and situations, then you have more input that you can use to make that decision. If it's just time apart, then you're not going to have any additional information. But so time by
Yeah,
itself not so important, but time with exposure and newness and opportunity, then that's where you start to get to know someone a little bit better and you can make better decisions based off of that.
it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Uh, so the next question: how do we find balance between family and our relationships? And that was from Jessica.
Yeah. This is, well, it depends on the type of relationship that you have. So if you have a committed relationship where you are living your life, with this person, then this is a different conversation than if you have dating relationships where you're like serial dating or you're looking for somebody. Because one of the hard things about relationships is managing both families. So managing time with your nuclear family unit and then with your extended family or his and then his extended family also. So just like the three buckets of relationships there will interact differently and depends on location. But when we're choosing a partner, it's important to align on those values before you decide to get into a committed relationship with them. If you have a high value for family, and it's important, you have a big family and you guys get together all the time and you spend all your holidays there, it's really important for you. It's a value that you have to continue that tradition, then that is something that you'll want to look for in flexibility with a partner coming forward. So when you're designing not very many people get this part right. When you're designing your relationship and you're looking for a match, a partnership, compatibility, these are the things that you want to do first up front so that you don't have these big conflicts once you're trying to hold the pieces together later. You chose a partner that also has a big family, that also cannot compromise, that really wants to spend all of their holidays with their family. And now you have this conflict that you have to manage. And that
Yeah.
is going to be something that is, that's conflict resolution. That'll be something that you have to create consensus around and game plan and strategize on. And it might be a working thing where you do a little here and a little there. Balance is going to look different for everybody. And there's no right or wrong answer on how much time to spend. It's really, what are your values? The hard part about answering that though, is knowing yourself, because the first thing that you should do in any relationship is have a relationship with yourself so that you know what's important to you. The last thing you want to do is just be spending all of this time with your family and not really wanting to do that, right? Feeling bitterness about spending all your energy, time, and effort with your family. And that's draining your capacity to have a committed, secure, loving, romantic relationship. So balance is going to be your responsibility. You have to decide how much family time do I need and want versus how much relationship time do I need and want, and then be able to flux that for big events like holidays or birthdays, things that are important for him. And then you take that, or her, you take that accountability for yourself. And the best part about this is to think through this and communicate it before that happens. Okay, we're coming into a big event like a vacation, or we're coming into a holiday. What do I want? What does he want? We have this thing that we do in Pivot called mine, theirs, and ours. And it's exactly this, just going through consensus. What is mine? What do I need? What is yours? What do you need? What can we do together?
It makes a lot of sense. I had issues with that myself in my relationships. Like, it was always the choice of family or them, and it shouldn't have had to be. Like, I should have made more choices toward everybody than just one or the other, because you start putting people against each other, and that's not good for your relationships either. Neither your family or your significant other. So I
And then,
definitely understand
yeah.
that. Go ahead.
And asking yourself, like, what do you want? Because if your want and desire is to spend more alone time with your significant other, then that is a telling thing, right? Okay, well, then you might have to have a real honest conversation with your family and say, hey, we're not coming over for this holiday. And then
Yeah.
and if you really want to spend time with your family, then you will have that crucial conversation with your spouse and your partner and say, hey, like, this is really important to me. And then you learn how to give and take. You learn how to make concessions and balance it out based off of the real-time information that you have.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So the next question is, how can we detect gaslighting in our relationships? Because usually other people see it, but we are usually blind to it. And that was from Brittany.
Yeah. Well, so gaslighting is like such a complex topic because not everything is gaslighting. And if you are aware of it, if you're aware of yourself and you're feeling that this is not right, then it's no longer gaslighting, right? Like, come back to this idea of it being personal responsibility. If you're allowing someone to do this to you, then it's no longer gaslighting. This is you choosing to be in this relationship where someone is taking advantage of your boundaries. So it is only gaslighting. We say this is a difficult thing, and this is, something that maybe not everyone's going to, agree with. But we talk about abandonment, and feeling abandoned in relationships as adults. Well, you can't abandon an adult because an adult can meet their own needs. You can abandon a child because abandonment is about leaving someone defenseless and unable to meet their needs. No one can abandon me. No one can gaslight me unless I'm allowing that to happen. So once we start to recognize that this is no longer sitting with us, it's my responsibility to tighten that boundary up. So the question was, how do you recognize when someone is gaslighting you? When they're not taking responsibility. So your responsibility is to say, hey, here is what I'm feeling. This is my feeling and my thought. If that person isn't giving you the space and respect to hear that out, not like, so if you're saying, you're making me feel this way, like that's a statement where you're projecting on someone else. I want you to take responsibility for your own feelings and say, regardless of your actions, regardless of truth, I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling, unimportant. And here's what I'd like from you. If you can get to that point where you can say that out loud to your partner, and if they can tolerate that and having a crucial conversation with you, then most likely they're not gaslighting you, But if you're not able to express your needs and wants, then it's more your responsibility for their behavior for not meeting your needs because it's not been expressed. You can't expect people to read your mind. You can't expect people to be perfect or to hold an expectation on somebody that they're not ready to meet. Remember, back to circle boundaries. If you've not had time plus consistency with a person and you have an expectation on them that they're not meeting, that's your responsibility to rectify. They're not going to meet that expectation because that's not the kind of person they are. And that's your choice to stay in relationship with them. And so it's not gaslighting, it's your choice. Now, if you start to notice my needs are not being met, I'm not feeling reciprocated, I'm not feeling like the time plus consistency is equaling trust, then maybe it is gaslighting. It doesn't even matter what you call it. That's just your cue to exit.
I've never thought about it like that. And in my own relationships, I know I got to the point of saying it was always them, and I hated that. Like, I really hated always being like, "Well, you did this. Well, you did this. Well, you did this,"
Mm-hmm.
and not thinking that I'm allowing it. And
Yeah.
once you realize that you're allowing it, you always have the choice to leave.
Yes.
And if you don't, then you don't, it doesn't bother you as much as you think. Um, Even though there's other situations in life that could be a factor, but
Yeah, for sure. There's
you,
always some kind of complexity. And it doesn't have to always end in leaving, but it does have to start with communication. You have to be explicit in your communication of your needs. Because no one's gonna know that they aren't meeting this need for you if you don't say it. And I know women are really like, we tend to more often get in this rut of like, well, I shouldn't have to say it. Well, yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, you shouldn't have to say it, but we're not living in a fantasy world. We're living in a reality. So the reality is you do have to say it. The reality is that if you don't say it, it's just as much your responsibility when it goes south as it is theirs. And if you don't feel like if it's a non-negotiable for you that you shouldn't have to explicitly say it, then you need to find a partner that matches that. And this person is obviously not it.
it was a big part in my life that I always say what bothers me. That way I know I told them. Like, that way they can't also, use it like, "Well, I didn't know," or "I didn't know, I don't know," and then, like, you get over that fact as soon as you tell them, and
Yeah.
you tell them. And then if they don't take responsibility, then you have choices to make.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's not
so
about pointing, like you said, it's not about pointing the finger to what they're doing wrong. So when you're communicating something that's a crucial conversation, it's more about saying how you feel. I'm feeling undervalued. I'm feeling sad. I'm making it really simple without even pointing to a specific thing. Like, or I'm feeling like your values aren't the same as my values. I'm seeing that you have a high value or a high need for alone time, and I'm feeling neglected. So if there's any way for you to say it explicitly, taking responsibility for what you're feeling instead of pointing out what they're doing wrong, because it doesn't matter what they're doing. What matters is how you're feeling.
yeah, and it usually doesn't help in the end anyway. It just
No.
makes the fight go longer. Like, you just end up making them mad, and then they don't wanna listen. So
Yeah.
you just have a new situation on your hands.
Hardly anybody can tolerate being accused, even if it's the truth. I mean, and it's not like
Yeah.
we on the receiving end also feel that way. It's a difficult thing to be accused of anything, especially when it's true, because we don't like, well, nobody's most often nobody's setting out to be a horrible person. No one's doing that for the explicit reason to be an awful person. Most of the time they don't know they're doing it. They think that they're having a different effect. They're going off of a different storyline in their head. And so having clarity on just being able to say the curiosity to say what's happening in your life that's making you feel like this is okay with a curiosity, and then giving them the benefit of the doubt by explicitly saying I'm feeling a certain way. Let them meet you halfway. They don't want you to be sad. They don't want you to be hurt. And if they do, now you know that's your cue to exit.
Yes, yes, that makes so much sense. Um, the next question: how do I strengthen my relationship once the damage has been done? And is it worth even trying at that point, or when is it safe to say it's over?
Mm,
That was by
yeah.
Rick.
Yeah. Oh, I think that it depends on the type of damage and the values, like we talked about in the past, the type of damage, the values. And being able to see a common future together. So when you can truly look at your own values. Here's what I want for my life. This is the direction that I'm going. And this is what I need my life to be like. These are my non-negotiables. And your partner can say, in truth, in reality, the same thing. Then you have a shot. There is a possibility of repair. If they see the same reality, they see the same future, they have the same values, then there's a shot going forward. Most of the time when we have things like infidelity or we have some kind of damage, it's because we don't have the same values. We're not going in the same directions. There's a dissonance in our relationship. There's not a communication. There's not the same standard. There's not the same trust or reciprocity. And so when we can get back to like, this is what I'm expecting and you're agreeing to it. This is what you're expecting and I'm agreeing to it. This is where we're going together. Then it makes it a lot easier to see those things that have happened in our past, these things that have been difficult, and make that a part of our story of overcoming. It's called the heroic story, because you can be in the middle of your story when things are hard, when the worst things happened. Really, almost none of the things that somebody else does to us has to be a deal breaker. There's not a lot that someone completely does to us that we 100% always have to get out of. If they still are in truth, that's the hard part, like being able to recognize if they are in truth, in earnest, and vulnerable with their sharing of being on the same page with you going forward. There's a way to repair. And part of that is just to be able to say, okay, that was our heroic story. If you, as a person that's taking this person back into your trust, of course, time plus consistency equals trust. So if you give it enough time to allow the consistency to play out, and then you decide from there that you're going to trust, it's a milestone. From here on out, we are starting this new. Everything else is a part of our heroic story. This is not us anymore. That was a chapter that's closed. And the agreement is that neither of us are going to use that prior information, those behaviors in the past, in our future fights. We're not going to ladder back to that. Those things are closed. I'm agreeing as a person moving forward in this relationship to close that chapter. If you can do that and make peace with yourself, then you can stay. If you can't do that, if you just can't make peace with saying that I will not hold this against you, I will trust you, I will go forward. If there's something in you that's not allowing you to move forward with trust and close the door, then that's when you need to go ahead and exit.
Okay, I want to add on to that question. What if the person continues to do the same things so you can't close those chapters? Like they keep repeating the same actions that keep the door open, so to say. Like if, say they cheat, and then you decide to let them, be okay with it enough to stay with them, and then they do it again, and then they do it again, and then they do it again. Like when do you still decide whether it's time to go or break it off because they continue to keep that wound open?
I
If that
mean,
makes
that
any
seems like a
sense.
pretty simple answer to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's value there? Are you staying in alignment with yourself by staying there? Probably not.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I know
It,
I've been there,
yeah.
and it hurts a lot when someone just repeatedly, you try to close the door on a situation that happened, and they continue to do the thing, and so it just keeps that wound open, and it's like you're trying to let it go, but they won't let you.
Right. In which
And
case, you're no longer getting your needs met in that relationship and you're not able to take care of yourself. And there is no trust and there's no safety. And so
yeah,
if you are choosing to stay in that relationship, then you would have to ask yourself why that is. Like, do I truly believe I deserve this kind of relationship where I'm not being respected, where I'm not being reciprocated, where I'm not being, there are plenty of times where a mistake has been made and that person truly believes it to be a mistake. And then two people work through it and they have a happy, secure, healthy, committed relationship going forward. That can happen. That's not always the case. But if it doesn't work out where the person is committed to security and safety and connection going forward, then you know that that's not the right person for you. You don't
and I
need to
think
keep giving them a third and fourth. You don't even have to give them a second chance. There's a high probability that you're going to find somebody that's not going to cheat on you if you give yourself the chance and the space and the bet on yourself. This is not your only choice. If you want to stay with somebody and you're committed to working it out, then do it. Close the door, go forward on it, make peace with it. If you don't, then don't.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Um, I noticed, and then when I went through those types of situations, I held on to it in my next relationship, and it didn't
Mhm.
help there because you're already starting to not trust this person because of what somebody else did, and it's like being able to let it go frees you in your next relationship as well, if you have a next relationship. Like, you're
Yeah.
not as paranoid, you're not as angry, and it gives other people an actual chance to be with you and
Mhm.
not be holding on to stuff that happened to you from other people.
Yeah, that's why it's
Um,
important to take a period of time in between relationships to integrate your learning. What did I learn about myself? What did I learn about other people? And then to challenge any beliefs that you have. Like sometimes you come out of a relationship really bitter, like all people will cheat on me. Well, that's
yeah,
not true, right? There's very little truth in that. And then being able to redirect that. I had an experience where someone cheated on me in the past. And is it possible that it's going to happen in the future? Yes. Is it probable? Depending on how I choose in the future. I have
yeah.
now more understanding of what it takes and what I'm looking for and my standards. And as long as I stay true to that, I have a lower probability of that happening again. Not zero, because it does happen. Things happen. But you can set yourself up for more success if you take time to integrate, to heal, to recognize what you learned, and then to peel apart those beliefs so that you're not bringing those into your next relationship.
Self-knowledge is power.
Hmm.
Just knowing yourself and being able to choose what's best for you
Yeah.
in the beginning, that way you don't have to go through the same stuff just over and
And
over
then
again.
and then when you do go through it, inevitably, you have more autonomy. You have more accountability for yourself. You have more agency. It doesn't take you completely out. It doesn't take you by
Yeah,
surprise. You're not completely knocked out for days afterwards. It's like, oh, okay, well, that was unfortunate. I'm sad about that. I wish it was going to go a different way, but I know my value. I know my worth. I know that there's going to be another opportunity. I'll go ahead and move on. And there's a lot less drama when you start working through it that way.
and a lot less pain.
Yeah.
I know I went through a relationship where it broke me from years, and I was just hurt and bitter and angry, and I couldn't even think about getting into other relationships because I was so heartbroken, but
Mhm.
I got through it, and then the next time that we dated, I we broke up, and I was better for it. I knew what was gonna
Yeah.
happen. I wasn't mad. I mean, for a while I was mad, but I got over it
Sure.
far
Yeah.
faster than I
You were
would
able to
have.
work with all of the feelings that you had. Yeah, that's exactly right. And relationships are our greatest teachers of ourselves, our greatest mirrors. We learn so much about ourselves in a relationship, and like there's so much beauty and there's so much enjoyment in that process also. But not all relationships are meant to last. And so we started this conversation with like, what's your measure of success? Well, the measure of a success in a relationship isn't that it lasts, right? The measure of success
Yeah,
in a relationship is that you respect each other and that you learn something about each other, and that you like the person that you were when you were in that relationship, and you can continue to see that as being successful even if the relationship does end. And especially if it ends amicably, like, oh, okay, well, this just wasn't right for us. And it can end amicably when you're in reality with your situation. But if you're expecting this fantasy of like relationships are only going to be successful if you're with them for 100 years, like that, there really is that there's not truth to that. So being able to level set your own expectations on what you're expecting from a person, and what you're expecting from yourself, and normalizing this feeling of being able to change and grow and have personal development along the way, and being able to give that person the space to do that, and then if by chance you grow apart or different ways, then it's okay to part. Like having those things as normal aspects of relationships really helps you tolerate when relationships do end.
that makes a lot of sense. I know I keep saying that, but it does.
Yeah.
Um, it really helps lessen the pain. And
Hmm.
I know a lot of people go through so much pain when it comes to relationships, and it's because we expect so much from them. And it's like a fantasy. Like, we hear this growing up, like relationships are a certain way and they have to be this way because that's how they've always been. And that's not the case. Like every
Yeah.
relationship is going to be different. And because of that, you have to learn about the person to know if this is going to work out for you. And you have to know yourself because you really don't understand what a lot of words mean to us. Like we don't think about, the intention behind them. Or it's like when I
Mhm.
know I didn't think about how I wanted to be loved or
Right.
what love meant to me.
Mhm.
And I started to, write it out and I would be like, this sounds like a fantasy book. I was like,
Mhm.
you can't really expect someone to be like this all the time because you're
Right.
not like that all the time. And
Right,
once
and
you
just
get
knowing that we're dealing with humans, right? Like nobody's
yeah,
perfect and everyone's got their own shit going on. And like, my personal standard with my husband is, I don't expect him to be perfect and I don't even expect him to be good all of the time. But what I do expect is that when he doesn't treat me well and I say, "Hey, that doesn't feel good to me," that he will at some point, maybe not right away, but in the next however long it takes with the situation, come back and have a conversation with me. My hands down baseline expectation is that when we're both grounded and have thought through it and have been able to come back to neutrality in our emotions, that we talk about it. And that's all I can ask for. I'm not expecting an apology every single time. I'm not expecting a changed behavior every single time. I'm expecting an honest conversation where we both get heard.
and that's what it takes. Communication is key
Yeah.
because you have to you have to allow somebody their say.
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to because you want somebody to listen to you. Like so in order for that to happen, you have to, do the same.
And you don't have to agree on everything, like there have been
Yeah.
times where I've done something that really upset him and he's unreasonably upset in my mind. He's like blowing it out of proportion. But he gets to. That's his choice. And it doesn't have to affect me that way. I don't need to change who I am to be a part of that. I can acknowledge it. So I'll say, "Hey, I understand that you're frustrated with me, and that makes sense, and I understand why." But that's not an apology either, because I don't think that there's a reason for an apology. There isn't a reason. There is a reason for validation. I hear you. I see how this is happening for you. I understand that this is going on. And if there needs to be some other kind of thing, like I can commit to being more mindful about this specific thing in the future. I can help, like I can meet you in your need for more communication on this thing or whatever. Then that happens too. But sometimes, like he's mad because he hasn't eaten yet, right? He's angry because he's hungry. And so now
Yeah.
it's a whole problem. And I let it be a whole problem. And then we get some food and then we regroup when we're in neutrality. And I'll say, "Whoa, that was crazy." And he's like, "I know that was crazy. That felt really crazy." And sometimes he'll say sorry. Sometimes I'll say sorry, but it's not unnecessary. It's not my value of a relationship and my meter of success isn't that I always get to be right or that I always get an apology or that he's always respectful, because we're all human and that is just not a reality.
And we all feel emotions differently.
Right.
Like it's just we're none of us are the same people, so we're going to see things a different way on some level at
Yeah.
some point.
Absolutely.
Like it's just something we're going to have to get used to. I know I
Yeah.
had to get used to it, and I'm still working on that. Like it's still an issue for me, but I work on it as much as I can, and I try to tell myself when I'm agitated or anything that is not aligning with who I am. I'm like, am I hungry? Have I had water today?
Do I need a
Am I
nap?
sick?
Do
Yeah,
I
do
need
I
a
need a nap?
walk? Do I need a
Yeah,
timeout?
yep.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I'm definitely one who in an argument will be like, I am going for a walk. And I'll
Mhm.
take the time to think. And because I have that time to think, I can come back more open to
Yes.
whatever you're saying than if I stay there and let you berate me. And I know I have an issue with berating people. I do have an issue like just doing that to people. And I don't think of it that way. I think of it as I'm just trying to explain to you why I'm upset. And it's usually what you did to me but it doesn't have to be. It's
Mhm.
more of this is why I'm feeling this way, and I just don't want to feel this way.
Have
And
you ever heard of the term pain body or core wound?
no,
So I'm hearing you speak, and if I had to guess, I would say that you have a high value on being understood. And so your core wound is being misunderstood. So anytime you feel like you're feeling that someone is misunderstanding you, you activate, your pain is much more intensified. And because of that, you are defense mechanism, but you didn't understand what I said, or you're not
yeah,
hearing what I'm trying to tell you. And so that makes sense to me that your conflict style would be that you want to over explain, and that you're saying berate, but I'm hearing over explain because you're really feeling misunderstood. And that makes you feel so out of control.
yeah, yeah. And then I want to keep explaining why
Right.
I'm
Until they
upset. Like, and
understand,
it's just,
until you're no longer
yeah,
misunderstood.
because I'm like, I may be using the wrong words, so I'll try a different set of words, and it's like
Right.
and so now been sitting there for an hour,
Yeah.
and it's just been me talking at this person, and they're like, uh,
Yeah. I think there's
don't
something
know
under
what
there
you're
for
talking
you. I
about, and
think
I'm
that,
like,
yeah, your core
yeah, I was
wound
just
might be
like,
misunderstood.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, it just yeah, and I've felt misunderstood
That
most of my life,
makes
so
so
like,
much sense to
and I
me.
know that's yeah, and I realized that, and I'm just like, sometimes being quiet is key, or sometimes just saying I am sad and walking off
Mhm.
instead of telling why you're sad and have someone sit there for hours at a time just listening
Yes.
to you talking about that. Yeah,
And
I
it makes
definitely
sense that
think it's that.
if you felt like part of your survival was compromised because people weren't understanding you when you were a child. So back to that like early attachment wound
Yeah,
of being misunderstood. If you felt unsafe when people didn't understand you, then it makes sense that you would really get big feelings when you felt misunderstood as an adult. And so I like when you were saying that, like, just say, I feel sad, and that could help. But even better than that, you could say, I feel misunderstood right now.
yeah.
And that might
I'm
just
thinking
be the leveler for the tone. So, when you're in conflict and you're recognizing that you're trying to over explain and you're really feeling so invested in their outcome, they need to understand me in order for me to feel okay. Then you realize, oof, like that's my pain body. I do not need to be understood a certain way in order to be okay. People can understand me however they want to. They can have whatever preconceived judgments that they want to. That does not change me or my security with myself. I am okay.
I think that was the biggest issue with my last ex was the fact that we were both over explaining.
Oof.
Like yeah, so it was a lot because I'm over explaining why I feel the way I do, and she's trying to defend herself, and I'm like, but I'm not trying to make you defend yourself. I just
I
want you to
just want
hear
to
me
be
out.
heard. Yep.
Yeah, and like you just get to that point of you get tired of it, and it's everyone just talking at each other, but not being heard. And like
Yeah.
you said, it's really about not being heard and
Yeah.
understood.
That's
And
right.
when you get to that underlying thing, you can work on it. And
Hmm.
sadly, at that time, we just couldn't work on it.
Well,
And
and if you both have the same type of core wound, then it's really, really difficult because then you're going to piggyback off of each other in conflict.
and we are very much alike. Like, so I saw all the things in her that I saw myself at the same age. So it was
Mhm.
just like, and I'm like, I don't want you to go through this. So I'm trying to like explain. And she's taking it in defense. And it piggybacked off each other, made it like snowball into so much more every time. And
Mm.
you just get tired of fighting. So it was rough, but I've learned so much because of it.
Yes, for sure. We
Um,
learn so much about ourselves in that stuff.
yeah, definitely that. Okay, let's see the next question. Oh, this is a nice one. How do you be the person who can bring out the best in your partner? And that was from Gypsy.
Mm,
That was a good one. I know.
I love
Like,
that question. That's a really sweet, wholesome question. So I'm glad they asked
yeah,
that. Mm. So curiosity is what really allows us for deeper, authentic connection. And when we can create a feeling of safety for somebody else and allow them to have whatever experience they're having. So normalize your partner's experience without taking on the need to change, correct, or fix it. So just holding that space, allowing them to have that experience and not internalizing it, not creating a drama out of it, not creating a story out of it. And that really creates safety for them. Those types of corrective experiences for people will really allow them to step out of that negative pattern. So it doesn't always happen that way, but if you're looking for a way to hold your partner in a way that will help them express the best parts of themselves, that's how to do it. Get curious about how things are going for them. Find ways to make them feel safe in conversations with you. Follow through with what you've said you were going to do, because there's nothing that kills safety more than not following through with something. If you're not trustworthy, then it's difficult to feel safe around you, right? That time plus consistency again. And then be your own person. Hold your own needs first. Allow them to have their own experience, and then be your own person outside of that experience so that you're not always being affected by everything that's happening with them. You're not always internalizing it. You're not always making it an issue. That is the hard things about relationships and the things that make them so beautiful and make them feel so valuable to people.
Yeah, I think creating safety is needed first, because if you can't trust the person, you're not going to go far. And
Yeah.
that's what we all want, to be able to trust somebody. It's like
Hmm.
inherent in being human. Like we have to, like, for it used to be part of survival that we had to depend on each other so we did get eaten. Like, it's a core factor for us. Like I have to be able to trust you no matter what you say, because we could both die if we don't, trust each other. And it was a instinctual type thing.
Yeah, and we
So
still have a high need for community and co-regulation and interdependence, right? Like those are still basic biological needs. And at the same time, safety is still intrinsic. It's still my responsibility to keep myself safe. So
yeah,
when you're outsourcing your safety to somebody else, you're taking away from your own power, because safety is about trust, but safety is about trusting yourself to be able to do the things that you need to do for yourself. And then trusting that your partner will benefit from that and that your partner will support you in doing that. So I trust me that I can do things that are safe for myself. I can make decisions in my own best interest. And I trust that you, as my partner, will support that.
I
That
think I
is
was
safety.
I think I was just looking at something like that on your page yesterday,
Probably,
and
I
I
probably
was
wrote
like,
that somewhere.
yes. And I was just like, I ended up liking everything on your page,
Oh, thank you.
and so if you check your Instagram and it's just the Nomothete, just like your stuff, it's gonna be in a row. I'm just letting you know that
Well, I
now.
appreciate the support. Thank you.
But it was like, I mean, I learned a lot about myself in that little bit of time of just looking through your stuff. And
Mm,
it was very helpful, and it made me think about things differently on a lot of different situations that I could have handled differently and probably saved my relationship.
You
And
know that
and
there are those possibilities, yeah, but we didn't
yeah,
know, right? So
but we
now we
didn't
know
know.
better, and we can do better when we know better.
Yeah. And who knows? It might change and I might get back with that person. You never know. Like, but the choice and time we'll see. Um,
Hmm.
so we'll definitely see. Um, oh, okay. This question is by Jim. It says, when after 24 years in a relationship filled with unconditional love, how does one cope with their partner's slothful habits? I have tried everything to no avail and accepted their ways, but I don't desire to continue living this way.
Mm. So unconditional love really, love between humans, in this physical realm here on Earth is not unconditional. It's
It's
not.
not.
And so when we are unconditional, what I hear is self-abandoning. So I am abandoning myself for your benefit. And that's what he seems like he's feeling is this, I've just pushed all my boundaries aside and let this be this person, do whatever they wanted or needed in the relationship. That way I can feel like I'm being unconditional. And somehow that meets my need for being a good partner. And it meets that person's need for having a caregiver, because it doesn't even seem like an emotional relationship in intimacy or romance anymore. It sounds like this has crossed over into the realm of like caregiver, where I'm now your parent. When I hear slothful, I don't know this person at all. I don't know what they're going through. But when I hear slothful, I feel like they're not picking up after themselves. They're not contributing to the household, the chores, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
And, oftentimes what I hear is that sounds like depression to me. That sounds like someone that doesn't have a passion for life, or that doesn't have vision or value in their life, doesn't have a mission for what they're doing. They don't feel good about the life that they're living anymore. And that needs to be a crucial conversation. So being able to look underneath, like, what are you passionate about? Like, what gets you up in the morning? Like, how can I support you in being the best version of yourself? When we talk about being in relationship, what we really want to do is bring the best version of ourselves forward as often as possible, to ourselves first, and then to other people in relationship afterwards. But if that person was being the best version of themselves for themselves, they would be getting up and doing their skincare routine and making their bed and drinking their water and taking themselves for a walk and doing all the things that they need to be doing that would contribute to a high impact life that nobody would call slothful. And that's really where you need to start, I think, with that, is just giving some accountability to that person. Like, you're unwell. This is not well behavior. This is sickness. And while this is your responsibility as a person to heal this, how can I help you with this? You need to get help. This is no longer just something that two people can work towards. This is someone saying, like, I'm not saying you need to go see a therapist. What I'm saying is, I'm worried about you. And this is not the life that you wanted. And this cannot feel good for you. This is not happiness for you. How do we get back to feeling fulfilled and connected here?
I think that's a great answer to that, because old me would have never thought about it like that.
Mm.
Um, like in the past few years, I know if I would have had that question, because I've been in relationships where the person didn't clean, and they would tell me they were depressed, and I'm like, you can't be that depressed. Like, old me would have literally handled it a far different way. I don't
You
know
sure can be so depressed that you don't ever do your laundry. It happens, man.
yeah, yeah, and like, I didn't see that in my partner. All I could see was the pain they were putting me through, or I felt they were putting me through. And,
Yeah. It's not
looking at it
about
as,
you.
yeah, it's not about you. And she would say that a lot to me. And I wasn't thinking at the time that I was doing that, but, looking back on it now from his question makes me be like, oh, snap. Like, oh,
Mm.
God.
And he doesn't have
So,
to stay, right? Like, it's not about
yeah,
him. He doesn't have to keep being a part of that either, right? Like,
yeah,
if he wants to salvage the relationship and have a future with this person to build consensus, he can start by having that conversation about being worried about her. And then it's not an ultimatum, but it is a boundary. Like, I can no longer be in this type of environment. Like, I will have to make a decision that's good for me if we can't figure this out. Not that it has anything to do with you. It has to do with me keeping myself safe, and me also giving you an opportunity to keep yourself safe and happy also.
I think that is wonderful, wonderful answer. Um, Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Because, like I said, from answering his question, that just opened up a whole lot for me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was needed. And it shows my evolution is still like, I'm still
Mhm.
processing through evolution.
So
And
is everybody else. We're all just learning
yes,
together.
yep, and we have to remember that we are doing this together. Like, we are
Yes.
all we got.
Yeah, truly.
And we need as many of us together as possible,
Mm.
because things get better when we're with people that we want to be around and love.
Yeah.
So, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's
Um,
really lovely.
I didn't get to any of my anxiety questions that I had for you, because I had many, many, many anxiety questions for you. So maybe you can come back to the show and we do a second one.
Yeah.
It was great having you here, though. Thank you for answering their questions. I know some of them will be very excited about hearing your answers. Um, and yeah, I like to end every show with asking this question. What is a question you would have for the next guest without knowing who the next guest is?
So, I have a podcast that's about to be airing soon called the Me First Mindset. And it's, as you've heard me talk through today, like most of what I think is so transformative about relationship coaching is taking radical responsibility for yourself and really, being able to be self-resourced. And most of my clients that I work with have such a hard time doing that. It's the scariest thing to be able to put yourself first. And we always think like, oh my gosh, like if I put myself first, then I'm going to lose out on all of these relationships. I'm not going to be a good wife or husband or daughter or mom or whatever. Like people won't like me. But in the reality, when you put yourself first, when you meet your needs first, you show up to all of your relationships more grounded, more secure, more loving, more stable, with more capacity. And so my question for the next guest is, what would life be like if I started to put myself first?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. How can my listeners get in touch with you if they would like services from you personally? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram where we met, Dr.Brea. So the word DOCTOR.Brea is the handle. And also drbrea.com is my website. I am taking one-on-one clients. I do have a mastermind. I've got a bunch of resources, like you said, about anxiety and depression on YouTube. And then that podcast coming out on YouTube at Dr. Brea also. And I would love to have more, questions. So if you guys have more questions, hit me up on Instagram or YouTube, and then we'll see you next time on the podcast, I guess.
She is a wealth of knowledge, and it was wonderful having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank
I can't
you.
say that. I can't stress that enough. I like to end the show with thank you for today, thank you for yesterday, and thank you for tomorrow. Always remember to question your reality, and at every end, there is a beginning. You guys take care. Thank you for being on the show. Bye.